Section 39, Volume 2 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cole McKinnon. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 2, Section 39. When it was the 102nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Sharrkan saw the Moslems in conquered plight, and the chamberlain upon the brink of retreat and flight, and the sword havoc dight among the righteous and workers of upright, the cause of this weakness among the Moslems was the accursed old woman Zat al-Dawahi, the foe of the faith. After seeing that Bahram and Rustam had set forward with their troops to join Sharrkan and his brother Zal al-Makan, repaired to the camp of the Mahometans before Constantinople, and caused the mission of the Emir Takash, as had been before said. In this her purpose was to divide the Moslem forces the better to weaken them. Then she left them and entered Constantinople, and called with a loud voice on the knights of the Greeks, saying, Let me down a cord, that I may tie thereto this letter, and do ye bear it to your king Afridun, that he may read it, and to my son King Hardub, that they both do what is written therein of bidding and forbidding. So they let down for her a string, and she tied thereto a letter, whose purport was the following: From the terriblest of tribulations, and the chiefest of all calamities, Zat al-Dawahi, to King Afridun, greeting. But afterwards of a truth I have contrived a device for destroying the Moslems, so bid you quiet and content. I have cozened and captured their Sultan, and the Wazir Dandan, and then I returned to their camp and acquainted them therewith, whereby their pride had a fall and their withers were wrung, and I have so wrought upon the host leaguering Constantinople, that they have sent 10,000 men under the Emir Takash to succor the captives, of whom there be now left but few. It is therefore my object that ye sally forth against them with all your power while this day endureth, and that ye fall on them in their tents, and that ye leave them not till ye shall have slain them to the last man. For verily the Messiah looketh down upon you, and the Blessed Virgin favoureth you, and I hope of the Messiah that he forget not what deed I have done. When her letter came to King Afridun, he rejoiced with great joyance, and sending at once for King Hardub of Greece, son of Zat al-Dawahi, read the letter to him as soon as he came, whereat he was exceedingly glad, and said, See my mother's craft, verily it dispenses with sword, and her aspect standeth in stead of the terrors of the day of dread. Rejoined Afridun, May the Messiah not bereave us for the venerable parent, nor deprive her of her wile and guile. Then he bade the knights give orders for sallying outside the city, and the news was noised abroad in Constantinople. So the Nazarenes and cohorts of the cross burst forth and unsheathed their keen sabres in their numbers, shouting out their professions of impiety and heresies, and blaspheming the Lord of all creatures. When the chamberlain saw the sally, he said, Behold, the Greek is upon us, and they surely have learned that our Sultan is far away, and happily they have attacked us, for that the most part of our troops have marched to the succor of King Zal al-Makan. Therewith he waxed wroth, and cried out, Ho soldiers of Al-Islam, and favourers of the true faith, an ye flee and are lost, but if ye stand fast, ye win. Know ye that valiancy lieth in endurance of outrance, and that no case is so strait, but that the Almighty is able to make it straight. Allah son you, and look upon you with eyes of compassion and faith. Thereupon the Moslems cried out, Allah Akbar! And the believer in the one God shouted his slogan, and whirled the mill wheels of fight with cutting and thrusting in main and might. Scimitars and spears played sore, and the plains and valleys were swamped with gore. The priests and monks priested it, tight girding their girdles and uplifting the crucifixes, while the Moslems shouted out the professions of the requiting king, and verses of the Koran began to sing. The hosts of the Compassion are one fought against the legion of Satan, and head flew from body of man, while the good angels hovered above the people of the chosen Prophet. Nor did the sword cease to smite till the day darkened and night came on and starkened. Now the miscreants had encompassed the Moslems and made sure of escaping the pains that awaited them, and the faithless greeded for victory over the faithful until day dawned and dazzled. Thereupon the Chamberlain mounted, he and his men, trusting thee Allah would help them to victory, and host was mingled with host, and battle rose afoot and took post, and heads flew from trunks whilst the brave stood in fast stead. The craven turned tail and fled, and the judge of death judged, and sentence sped, so that the champions fell from their saddles slain, and corpse cumbered meadow and plain. Then the Moslems began to give ground, and rearwards bent, and the Greek took possession of some of their tents. Whereupon the Moslems were about to break and retreat and take flight, when meanwhile behold, up came Sharrkan with the rest of the host of Al Islam, and the standards of the believers in unity. And having come up with them, he charged the Infidels. And followed him Zau al-Makan, and the Wazir Dandan, and the Emirs Bahram and Rustam, with his brother Tarkash. When the foe saw this, they lost head, and their reason fled, and the dust clouds towered till they covered the country, whilst the righteous believers joined their pious comrades. Then Sharrkan accosted the Chamberlain and praised him for his steadfastness. And he in turn gave the Prince joy of his timely succour and his gaining the day. Thereat the Moslems were glad and their hearts were hardened, so they rushed upon their enemies and devoted themselves to Allah in their fight for the faith. But when the idolaters beheld the standards of Mohammedan, and thereon the profession of faith of Islamitan, proclaiming the unity, they shrieked woe and ruin, and besought succour of the patriarchs of the monasteries. Then they fell to calling upon John and Mary and the cross abhorrent, and stayed their hands from slaughter, whilst King Afridun went up to consult King Hardub of Greece, for the two kings stood one at the head of each wing, right and left. Now there was with them also a famous cavalier, Lawaya highs, who commanded the centre, and they drew out in battle array, but indeed they were full of alarm and affray. Meanwhile the Moslems aligned their forces, and thereupon Sharrkan came to his brother, Zau al-Makan, and said, O King of the Age, doubtless they mean to champion it, and that is also the object of our desire. But it is my wish to push forward the stoutest hearted of our fighters, for by forethought is one half of life wrought. Replied the Sultan, As thou wilt, O companion of good counsel. It is my wish, added Sharrkan, to stand in midline opposite the Infidel, with the Wazir Dandan on my left, and thee on my right, whilst the Emir Bahram leads the dexter wing, and the Emir Rustam leads the wing sinistral. And thou, O mighty King, shalt be under the standards and the ensigns, for that thou art the pillar of our defence. Upon thee, after Allah, is our dependence, and we will all be thy ransom from aught that can harm thee. Zau al-Makan thanked him therefore, and the slogan arose and the sabre was drawn. But as things stood thus, behold, there came forth a cavalier from the ranks of Rome, and as he drew near, they saw that he was mounted on a slow-paced she-mule, fleeing with her master from the shock of swords. Her housings were of white silk covered by a paper carpet of cashmere stuff, and on her back sat a sheikh, an old man of comely presence and reverend aspect, garbed in a gown of white wool. He stinted not pushing her and hurrying her on till he came near the Moslem and said, I am an ambassador to you all, and an ambassador hath naught to do save to deliver. So give me safe conduct and permit of speech, that I communicate to you my message. Replied Sharrkan, Thou art in safety. Fear neither sway of sword nor lunge of lance. Thereupon the old man dismounted, and, taking the cross from his neck, placed it before the Sultan, and humbled himself with much humility. Then quoth to him the Moslems, What is with thee of news? And quoth he, I am an ambassador from King Afridun, for I counseled him to avert the destruction of all these frames of men and temples of the Compassionate One, and to him it seemed righteous to stay the shedding of blood, and limit it to the encounter of 2 knights in shock of fight singular. So he agreed to that, and he saith to you, Verily, I will ransom my army with my life. So let the Moslem king do as I do, and with his life ransom his host. And if he kill me, there will be no stay left in the army of Rome, and if I kill him, there will be no stability with the Moslems. When Sharrkan heard this, he said, O monk, I agree to that, for it is just, nor it may be gainsaid. And behold, I will meet him in duel, and do with him daring do. For I am champion of the faithful, even as he is champion of the faithless. And if he slay me, he will have won the day, and naught will remain for the Moslems' forces save flight. So return to him, O thou monk, and say that the single combat shall take place tomorrow, for this day we have come off our journey, and we are aweary. But after rest, neither reproach nor blame fear ye. So the monk returned, and he rejoicing, to King Afridun and King Hardub, and told them both what Sharrkan had said. Whereat King Afridun was glad with exceeding gladness, and fell from him anxiety and sadness. And he said to himself, No doubt but this Sharrkan is their doughtiest swayer of the sword, and their durest at lunge of lance. And when I shall have slain him, their hearts will be disheartened, and their strength will be shattered. Now Zat al-Dawahi had written to King Afridun of that, and had told him how Sharrkan was a knight of the braves, and the bravest of knights, and had warned him against him. But Afridun was a stalwart cavalier, who fought in many a fashion. He could hurl rocks, and throw spears, and smite with the iron mace, and he feared not the prowess of the prow. So when he heard the report of the monk that Sharrkan agreed to the duel, he was likely to fly for exceeding joy, because he had self-confidence, and he knew that none could withstand him. The infidels passed that night in joy and jubilee and wine bibbing, and as soon as it was dawn, the 2 armies drew out the sword of spear and the blanch of blade, and behold, a cavalier rode single-handed into the plain, mounted on a steed of purest strain, and for foray and fray full ready and fain. And that knight had limbs of might, and he was clad in an iron cuirass, made for stress of fight. On his breast he wore a jeweled mirror, and in his hand he bore a keen scimitar, and his lance of Cahalan wood, the curious work of the Frank, weighing a quintal. Then the rider uncovered his face and cried out, saying, Whoso knoweth me verily hath enough of me, and whoso knoweth me not, right soon shall ken who I be. I am Afridun, the overwhelmed by the well-omened Shawahi Zat al-Dawahi. But he had not ended speaking ere Sharrkan, the champion of the Moslems, fared forth to meet him, mounted on a sorrel horse, worth 1,000 pieces of red gold, with accoutrements purfled in pearls and precious stone. And he bore in baldric a blade of watered Indian steel, that through neck shore, and made easy the hard and sore. He drave his charger between the 2 hosts in line, whilst the horsemen all fixed on him their eyne. And he cried out to Afridun, Woe to thee, O accursed! Dost thou deem me one of the horsemen thou hast overtaken, who could not stand against thee on a battle plain? Then each rushed upon other, and they bashed together like 2 mountains crashing, or 2 billows dashing and clashing. They advanced and retreated, and drew together and withdrew, and stinted not of fray and fight and weapon play, and strife and stay, with stroke of sword and lunge of lance. Of the 2 armies looking on, some said, Sharrkan is victor, and others, Afridun will conquer. And the 2 riders stayed not their hands from the hustle, until ceased the clamor and the bustle. And the dust columns rose, and the day waned, and the sun waxed yellow and warm. Then cried out King Afridun to Sharrkan, saying, By the truth of the Messiah, and the faith which is no liar, Thou art not save a doughty rider and a stalwart fighter, but thou art fraudful, and thy nature is not that of the noble. I ken thy work is other than praiseworthy, nor is thy prowess that of a prince. For thy people behave to thee as though thou wert a slave, and see, they bring thee out a charger which is not thine, that thou mayst mount and return to the fight. But by the truth of my faith, thy fighting irketh and fatigueth me, and I am weary of cutting and thrusting with thee. And if thou propose to lay on a load with me to-night, thou wouldst not change aught any of the harness nor thy horse, till thou approve to the cavaliers thy generous blood and skill and brunt. When Sharrkan heard him say these words concerning his own folk behaving to him as though he were a slave, he waxed wroth and turned towards his men, meaning to sign to them and bid them not to prepare him change of harness or horse, when lo! Afridun shook his throw spear high in the air and cast it at Sharrkan. Now when the Moslem turned his back, he found none of the men near him, and he knew this to be a trick of the accursed infidel. So he wheeled round in haste, and behold, the javelin came at him. So he swerved from it, till his head was bent low as his saddle bow. The weapon grazed his breast, and pierced the skin of his chest, for Sharrkan was high bosomed. Whereupon he gave one cry and swooned away. Thereat the accursed Afridun was joyful, thinking he had slain him, and shouted to the infidels, bidding them rejoice. Whereat the faithless were encouraged, and the faithful wept. When Zau al-Makan saw his brother reeling in seal so that he well nigh fell, he dispatched cavaliers towards him, and the braves hurried to his aid and came up with him. Thereupon the infidels dove at the Moslems. The two hosts joined battle, and the two lines were mingled, whilst the keen scimitar of Al-Yaman did good work. Now the first to reach Sharrkan was the Wazir Dandan. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of Section 39. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 2.